Pacers Knicks tonight. Big game for the Pacers against a big test at home. Can they continue to get some wins and build a win streak? Should be fun. Alex Wolfe from the Locked On Knicks podcast is going to join me to preview that game. And then Malcolm Brogdon says at practice he's going to play in this game. He and Caris LeVert will share the court for just the 22nd game at the same time. Want to break down that duo and how they can fit together potentially under Rick Carlisle. Lots to get to today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On crossover time. Pacers Knicks tonight. Two teams that one is doing very well and one is not doing very well, meeting in Indiana to try to both continue on the paths they've been on this season, although the Knicks coming off a loss, Pacers coming off a win. We'll see where that guides these teams. I'm Tony East from the Locked On Pacers podcast. I cover the team for Forbes and the West Side Community News. Of course, right next to me, if you're on YouTube, if you're not, as you can hear from Locked On Knicks, Mr. Alex Wolfe. Alex, how are you, man?
Hey, what's up, Tony? How you doing? I'm good. As you said, Knicks coming off a loss, so this has high potential to be a Knicks firing on all cylinders game. So I'll just warn you ahead of time because they're probably coming off their worst loss of the season. So
I was workshopping that could be the case, and they after their last loss this season, or their first loss, they just smoked the Sixers in their next game. So always dangerous to get a good team coming off of a loss. And it's the Knicks and Pacers who join in lockstep as the two teams that Terrence Ross decides to be good against in the NBA. So it'll be fun to see how these two. Yeah, Terrence Ross actually averaged the Pacers and Knicks, the two teams he averaged the most points per game against last year and 2 years ago. He's just it's ridiculous how good he is against those two teams. This game is fascinating to me because there's been a lot of projections before the season about where these teams would end up. And a lot of them had the Pacers and Knicks really close in the standings, which didn't really feel right to me. The Knicks were the 4 seed last year, have Julius Randle, RJ Barrett taking a step forward, add Kemba Walker, and the Pacers got a little better, but not as much better as the Knicks. That kind of surprised me. In the early season records, these teams have already separated a little bit, although the Pacers are definitely better than their 2-6 record. So what's up with the Knicks right now? How good have they been so far? They're currently 5-2, and do you feel like it was kind of a misstep that they were on the level of the Pacers scene before the season?
Yes and no. It's tough to diagnose, right? Because I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say a win's a win. That's literally what I've been saying. I think I've let that phrase come out of my mouth 10 times over the last 2 weeks or whatever since the season started. Well, a win's a win. It doesn't matter if you gave up a 12-0 run to the Bulls at the end of the game and they almost won the game, or if you let the Pelicans without Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson get way too close for comfort, and it took RJ Barrett scoring 15 points in the fourth quarter to finish that game off. A win's a win, and this is what good teams do. And we're not going to be looking back on this late in the season and be like, oh, well, the Knicks won 50 games this year or something, if the best happens, and be like, oh, well, but they weren't quite good enough in the first 3 weeks of the season. So, teams that are good and teams like the Knicks that have gotten better find ways to win. That said, I think maybe like you said with the Pacers, where they are better than their record would indicate so far, I think they're playing, and people might not agree with this with me, but I think that there's definitely a case that the Knicks, have played worse than their record indicates so far. The thing with them is that they're so bad at just consistent effort throughout the whole game. The real big theme has been, I think other than maybe the Magic loss, their first loss of the season, which they kind of just stunk it up throughout the whole game. I think other than that, and maybe I'm just misremembering, and they did in that game too, but I think they've held a double-digit lead in every single game this season. There's not been a single one where they've had a wire-to-wire, real close game with some team, even though the Celtics game kind of turned into that with the 2 overtime thing and all that. There just hasn't been too many where they've been for the entire game battling with a team. They've been getting out by 15, sometimes 20 points in the first, second quarter, and then just blowing it. And it's like they revert back to just the worst versions of themselves. They're ISOing constantly. They're not they play this beautiful team ball to open games sometimes where they're just whipping the ball around the perimeter and driving and kicking and everything's great. And then they just sort of find this complacency in the second quarter and sometimes the second half and kind of like let it all slip away and then have to scramble at the end to try to pull the win out. And, the thing in the Raptors game was they went way too hard on the lazy aspect in the third quarter. And also the second quarter, I mean, they let them get back into the game after being up by 15, but then the third quarter just totally blew it and just decided to stop defending the 3-point line for whatever reason. And that was literally the only thing that particular Raptors squad could do, short their two best players. And, they made tons of threes. So the big thing with the Knicks is like, I think that they have the talent to reach a level of that higher team. And I do think that if everything breaks perfectly for both of these two teams, the Knicks should be at least a couple playoff seats higher than the Pacers, just based off like talent level and everything else. But they need to start taking every team a little more seriously because they're not like the 2017 Warriors or something where they can just like not care for 3 quarters, turn it on for 1 quarter and make a 15-point comeback and win just because they feel like it. So I think it's just finding that balance. And it's been a little rough to watch as a Knicks fan to start this season so far.
I am the only Locked On host that will not give you sympathy for blowing big leads because let me tell you about the Indiana Pacers of the 2021-22 season. They are excellent in the first quarters and pretty good in the second and third quarters, or in the second and fourth quarters. In the third quarters, the Pacers have the worst net rating in the NBA. They blew a 23-point lead against Charlotte in just 1 quarter in 5 minutes in their first game of the season. They blew a huge third quarter lead against the Wizards in their second game of the season. They blew a huge lead against the Heat in their third game of the season in the third quarter. They scored 8 points that quarter. So they have the worst net rating in third quarters in the league, minus 29. Very bad. The Knicks are at minus 8, if you want some reference for how awful these.
If you check the fourth quarter, though, I think I saw a stat out there that the Knicks are like one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in the entire league in net rating in the fourth quarter right now, or defensive rating maybe was the one.
They are 25th in net rating in the fourth quarter, and they are, in fact, last in defensive rating in the fourth quarter.
Bingo.
So maybe that's where the Pacers can fight with this Knicks team.
Yeah, I think they were at like 130 defensive rating in the fourth quarter or something like that. It's ugly. It's very. So
is this going to be the most ridiculous second half where the Knicks just dominate the third quarter and the Pacers dominate the fourth quarter? Maybe that's what's going to happen. But that's what makes the Pacers so hard to evaluate compared to their record. Is they've looked good for a lot of their games and they're always right, except for one Raptors game. Which why are the Raptors so hard to beat for these good teams? They just can't win. They're 2-6 for a reason. So the Knicks will be a good test for them, and I think the Knicks have been a good test for them. I think the Pacers beat the Knicks on opening night last year and then lost the rest of their meetings. And the Knicks are a tough matchup for them for 2 reasons. One is the biggest kryptonite for the Pacers for seasons now, 3 seasons. So basically since Thad Young left is big forwards and strong forwards just destroy them. And Julius Randle is not like the pinnacle of that, right? He's just like a bowling ball against the Pacers. He just stumbles into the lane, bumps into guys and scores because they have nobody who can offer him enough resistance to stop him. Sabonis does well at times defending him. Torrey Craig is better than anyone they've had in a couple seasons to do it, but they don't really have the right bodies for that, and he's done very well against them and has been a big factor. And the other one is, I don't know if you remember this, let's go through RJ Barrett's early season of 2021.
I remember this, man. I remember this vividly.
RJ Barrett starts the season against the Pacers, 3 for 3 from deep. Next game, 0 for 6. Next game, 0 for 4. Next game, 0 for 3. Next game, 0 for 8. Then they play the Pacers again in the 6th game. RJ Barrett shoots 4 for 5 from deep. It made no sense. He averaged 25 points against the Pacers last year, 6.7 rebounds, 3.3 assists, shot 79% from 3. He was ridiculous against this Pacers team. So if that comes back down to earth, maybe the Pacers will have a little more of a shot. But between their inability to contain Randle just from their roster buildup and RJ just being absurd, they couldn't match up with this team. Now they have a lead guard in Kemba who's tremendous or better than what they had last year. So I think the Pacers can win certain matchups. Sabonis has done very well against the Knicks for years and years, for example, but they're really going to struggle with the Knicks' best players, and that makes me feel like the Knicks have enough advantages to get a win in this game if they're playing their best.
Well, let me tell you, you've got something to look forward to, probably in a bad way, with RJ Barrett. He's literally coming off, I mean, he's had probably the best 3-game stretch of his career the last 3 games. He's averaging, I think, like 27.5 points on
wow.
roughly like 62, 80 from the field. So yeah, things are looking up for RJ right now. He's been playing fantastic. If anything, maybe Randall's play lately has been a little more subpar. It doesn't really show up on the stat sheet, but I mean, he's been like offensively, for example, in the last game against the Raptors, he had 18 points in the first quarter and then only 4 points thereafter. Put up a decent counting stats other than that, but 2 games prior to that wasn't scoring super well. He hasn't looked very engaged on the defensive end lately, which has not been great. There's been, some chatter among fans and whatever, just that he seems, I don't know, just disengaged for some reason right now. But yeah, RJ is going to give you some trouble. And I think that there's something to that. I mean, his game is looking fantastic this year. He was, and if it makes you feel better, Tony, last year, after those Pacers games and then that cold stretch, he shot like 45% from 3 for the rest of the year after like the first 13 games of the season or something like that. So, I mean, he had himself a pretty good year after that. The Pacers ones kind of just portended what came later on. But I mean, he's looking like he's added so much to his game this year. He's hitting step back threes now. He's getting into the lane and then pulling up for middies now and like baseline jumpers, kind of reminiscent of what like Julius was like what was his bread and butter last year. He's getting all the way into the hoop, and that's never been an issue for him, but finishing and drawing contact have been, and he's doing that so much better this year. He's finishing through contact like a madman. I think he's over that same stretch, or maybe even for the whole season so far, he's shooting like, actually, yeah, I think it was, I looked this up earlier for a piece. I think he's shooting like 63% from like inside of 10 feet for the season so far right now. And he's kind of added like this little floater a little bit too, which is like a common theme on the Knicks. Like they freaking love floaters. So he's shooting the floater pretty well. He's getting all the way to the cup and finishing through contact. The biggest thing is the pull-up shooting, and he's doing those at such a higher frequency and then making them at a higher rate. He's shooting like 40% on almost 2 pull-up threes a game this year after shooting like 30% on like 0.2 or something last year. So he's sort of, and I mean, it's small sample size, of course, but he's sort of starting to look like he might be making that transition from just like good player to we might have a potential future superstar on our hands here. And time will tell, of course. Maybe the Pacers this year, maybe it'll be a bizarre world thing. This will be the game where he falls back to earth, rather
the
than
karmic balance of the universe demands that
exactly. But yeah, he's looking great. I mean, he's the biggest story coming into this game, I think, from an individual perspective for the Knicks.
Well, I will give you a reason for the Knicks to have fear in this game, and it is not something you're going to expect, and it's actually going to be very sad reason why the Knicks should have fear for this game. But before I do that, I got to tell everybody who's listening about the good people over at McDonald's, because this episode of both Locked On Knicks and Locked On Pacers is brought to you by McDonald's, who have been proudly serving communities since 1965. They've always been more than just a place to get good food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up to study, knowing they'll have good Wi-Fi and good food. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge, and it's the place you can always look forward to stopping on a long road trip to rest your legs, and refuel. I used to go there with my mom and get McFlurries as a kid all the time. You've got to do something fun there too, and maybe even one day we'll have a Locked On Pacers watch party or a Locked On Knicks watch party for games in a McDonald's. You got to go check them out. It's always been a place to get more than just food and have a good time. It's a place where you can reconnect. McDonald's, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it. Alex, here is your reason for fear about the Indiana Pacers in this basketball game. For the first time since April 18th, 2021, the Pacers will have 4 healthy starters in the same basketball game. That game, they had Turner, Sabonis, Brogdon, LeVert all healthy. Turner got hurt that game, missed the rest of the season. The start of this season, they missed LeVert. Right when LeVert came back, Brogdon got hurt. They haven't had TJ Warren all year. They've been 3 or 2 starters for most of their games. This is the time, for the first time in 7 months, that the Pacers will have 4 healthy starters at the same time. Fans of this team are counting their blessings, because that's not even that awesome, but compared to what they've had, it is a huge blessing. So it's going to be awesome to see how Brogdon, who had played very well this season when he was healthy, and LeVert, who has been a huge jolt for this team since his return over the weekend, can fit together, along with Sabonis, who has kicked the Knicks' butts in recent seasons, and Turner, who's having, I think he still leads the league in blocks or is up there. I'm looking forward to seeing all four of them together, and that gives me hope for this Pacers team because they've been playing well with fewer starters. So seeing how adding them in can help, and also kicking some lower guys out of the rotation, that is where I get a little optimistic that the Pacers have at least a shot in this game. The Knicks are obviously good. They beat them last year. They were the 4 seed. I get it. But just finally seeing this team under Rick Carlisle with all those guys at the same time is so fascinating to me. And I think that they all fit what he likes to do, given the sample size we've seen from them playing under him so far. So I think there's a chance that all those guys, and I'm assuming Chris Duarte is going to be the 5th starter, playing at the same time is going to give this Pacers team a big boost, especially at home. And that gives me optimism that the Pacers can be just hard enough to guard for this Knicks team in this game.
Well, let me give you a counterpoint here. Unfortunately for the Pacers, being at full strength maybe means that the Knicks will take them more seriously because it seems the 2 games that the Knicks lost this year were against woefully shorthanded teams. They faced the Magic, who are I don't know if things have gotten a little better for them health-wise, but at the time we're down Isaac, Fultz, and someone else, I think, which are a couple pretty key players for them. And then the Raptors yesterday were down not just Siakam, who they have been down, but then also Scotty Barnes somewhat unexpectedly. And I think that's part of why the Knicks come out, think that they can just get up by 15 points and then just stop playing. So I know this is exciting for you, but this might inspire the Knicks to beat on them a little harder. One matchup, though, that I will say that I am really intrigued to watch based off what you said, with Miles Turner, there was a lot of Knicks fan debate of if Turner became available. He's always one of those guys that comes up the Knicks should look for him because he can shoot the 3, but he can still block shots and do all the stuff that they want out of the center position. And some people like me like Mitchell Robinson a little better for various reasons. And Mitch has played really well so far this year. I think he's bulked up a ton. He's, he's just an absolute monster on the glass right now. He's not blocking as many shots on a hard number basis, but he's I think the ultimate rim deterrent in the NBA right now. Literally, I've seen players come in, have somewhat of a shot at getting to the rim, and then seeing Mitch 2 strides away and making the business decision to not even go for it and kicking it out of, to the 3-point line or whatever again, even if there's not anything particularly great out at the 3-point line for them to kick it to. So yeah, it'll be an intriguing matchup. I want to see how that goes. Also, Randall and Sabonis, that's such a fun matchup. 2 All-Stars last year. Sabonis, I think now 2-time All-Star, right? He was All-Star last year and the year prior.
Yep.
But they have kind of similar play styles where they're bigs, that score points and get rebounds, but they also are probably, just out of, we'll use the qualifier of out of power forwards, because then that rules out Jokic. But probably the 2 best passing power forwards in the NBA, if I had to rank them. So they always play an entertaining brand of basketball. So that should be a fun matchup to watch. That was one that I remember. It looked like Randall was kind of taking personally last year. I think it was the 3rd matchup between the 2 that Randall went off, if I remember correctly. And also sort of was a defensive menace on Sabonis in that game. I know there was one of them last year. I don't know if it was the 2nd or 3rd game. But yeah, it'll be fun to watch, but just beware. Being at full strength generally means the Knicks take you more seriously, and they're more likely to win those games than they are against the teams that have multiple starters out, and that they come in taking them too lightly and then take their foot off the gas about 8 minutes into the game. So it'll be intriguing to see. But as I said too, you might also be in for just, no matter who's out there, an angry Knicks team that will play for 48 minutes just because they've been getting chewed out by Tibbs for 2 straight days. So that's also potentially on the docket there.
Unbelievably fair. Yeah. I think the Pacers had I don't know if Carlisle chewed anybody out, but Sabonis after one practice was talking about how they need a little more effort to start games. So I think the Pacers had their little kick in the butt after their 1-4 start as well. So I'm excited for this game for a litany of reasons. And the biggest matchup and the biggest one you already mentioned is Sabonis and Randall. And it's fun that it's not old school. They're not like back to the basket post up guys, but just the way the NBA is now, they're kind of unique in the way they play and the way they operate and the type of players they are. And so just seeing them going at each other is always really fun to me. And they're both lefties, which is always cool too. So just that little bit of a shift compared to what you normally watch is really exciting. And outside of the game you just said, I think it was right before the All-Star break too. So voting might have been a factor in Randall's enhanced motivation to dominate in that game. But yeah, he that was the blueprint for him to do well against Sabonis, who has typically done well against the Knicks. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Carlisle tries to get Sabonis buckets, and Turner versus Mitch Robb is always fascinating. I would advise you to check on Miles Turner's 3-point percentages for the last 3 seasons before he gets the 3-and-D label from other fan bases. But he can shoot better than most centers for sure. Yeah. But he's mostly just a defensive beast at this point. He did have a 40-point game this season, so in the right matchups, when he can put the ball on the floor a little more, he can really be a disruptor. So he might be able to stretch Mitch out because of that more so than the shooting. The biggest matchup to me isn't even one you said yet, and that is Malcolm Brogdon versus Kemba Walker, because I value lead ball handling play quite a bit. And if Brogdon can outplay Kemba, which is very hard to do, even though Kemba's been a little inconsistent for the Knicks based on my limited watching, I have not watched all their games. I think that can be a big for the Pacers. Brogdon's had some good games for this team, although he's been inconsistent even within a game. He'll struggle in one quarter and be awesome in the next. So if he can he struggles guarding Kemba in the past. He's very quick laterally, which Brogdon kind of struggles with. So that could be a big advantage for the Knicks. If he can defend pretty well and kind of be stretching the floor out and playing off of LeVert and Sabonis, which he hasn't been able to do all season, I think that could be a big key for the Pacers to get some advantages in this game. But I mean, Kemba's been a beast for so long, so I don't know how to rate that matchup. But starting 5 on starting 5, there's so many fascinating matchups in this game that could shift the balance of who wins.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see too, because I mean, obviously Brogdon is, I think, a pretty damn good defender, and he presents some issues for guys like Kemba because he's so big. It's like Kemba is so small, and to have a guy in a Brogdon that can capably defend you at the one like that can be a little difficult when you're a diminutive point guard like that. That said, one thing, and I mean, maybe this is just something that, I feel like I never really saw too much of this, because Kemba was always kind of like the guy handling the ball. But since he's been with the Knicks, they've been running him off screens a little bit more now, and trying to utilize him in that way. Or, occasionally he'll still have the ball in his hands, but they'll run a double screen from up top with Randall and Mitch. And then they'll sort of give, it's almost like a read option where it's he gets the option then of, okay, do I want to just hoist the 3 here? Do I want to drive in just a little, draw Randall's defender and then kick to him for a pick and pop sort of? Do I want to take it all the way towards the rim and then hit Mitch for a lob? And he's done all those different things. The thing to me that stood out, and this was something that he did, I think, in the Sixers game that the Knicks won. I think he did this a couple times, and it was sort of his first breakout for them in that game, because he had struggled a little bit in the first few games of the season. He was taking those screens, and then just his pull up is just so lightning quick that, I mean, his man, I think he had Thibault on him at one point. I mean, who obviously is a fantastic defender, and Thibault tried to get over the screen and was pretty successful against most players in the NBA. He probably would have bothered their shot in some way. And also the defender of whoever it was, maybe it was Tobias Harris or something, was trying to cheat up also. And he was just so quick with the find a spot, pull up, shoot, that he was able to get those shots off. So, I mean, it just goes to show, when they're at their best, the Knicks have been coming up with sets that, even when they're well defended, can generate shots for guys like Kemba, because he's still so talented. The one thing that maybe he's falling off a bit is the getting to the rim and the finishing at the rim, but his pull-up shooting is still elite of elite when it's at its best. And I mean, that's been showing so far this year. He's shooting like something obscene from 3. It's 56% on 6-7 attempts per game or something like that. So it's been showing through, and that's something they've been leaning on heavily. So I can't imagine that's going to change too much in this game. It'll be a good test for Brogdon, though, to see how he is, defensively against Kemba like that.
I would certainly give the Knicks the bench guard advantage with Rose and IQ. Quickly, he's so close to a breakout that I don't know if it'll be this year, but he is good. And the Pacers have Isaiah Jackson now, so hopefully they can benefit from every Kentucky player ever being underdrafted for some reason. But I think the forward advantage on the bench would go to the Pacers between Justin Holiday and Torrey Craig, although, again, no slouches for Taj Gibson and Alec Burks. And even now, Obi Toppin, who I picked to win Rookie of the Year last year like a complete idiot because he didn't even play. So that a good reason to get it wrong. So maybe the Knicks bench is a little better, but that could be a wash. Maybe I'm just being a little Pacers colored glasses in that discussion. That said, I think this will just come down to which starters can be better than their opposition matchup. It's very interesting how it stacks out kind of evenly between the best players at the same positions. The big question, Alex, who's winning this game?
I mean, I think it's going to be the Knicks. If the Knicks had magically pulled out that game against the Raptors yesterday, I would probably say the Pacers would have a really good shot at winning this game, coming back full strength and all that stuff. But I think we've sort of seen with the Knicks so far this year that there's only been 2 of them so far. And so we only have a sample size of 1 since the second comeback game hasn't happened yet. But on games coming off of a embarrassing sort of loss like that, where they're facing a shorthanded team and then just kind of get their butts handed to them, they did pretty well the first time. So I think they're going to come out with a certain verve and anger in how they're playing. And I think that's pretty dangerous if they stay engaged the whole game, because that's really been their biggest problem, is just not staying engaged for all 48 minutes. And I think they're going to do that. I think they ultimately win this game.
The Pacers have only played bad once this year. That was the Raptors last Wednesday. Ironically, maybe Wednesday games are just their kryptonite. But I think they can hang with the Knicks for most of the game, but they haven't. We talked about second half struggles. Might just be if they can play a consistent game, the Pacers can win. By the way, I will pick the Knicks as well, just because I think they're better. But I think this game will be very close the entire time. The Pacers are playing.
For what it's worth, I think so too. I think so. Yeah. I think it'll be close as well.
I think most Knicks Pacers games for all of time have been close. There was that game, I think 2 seasons ago, where neither team scored for the last 4 minutes, and it was a 3-point game the entire time. And Randall missed a free throw right at the end that let the Pacers win in MSG.
But I was at that game. That was fun.
Yeah, that was a good one. So Turner had a nice block, I think, to seal that one as well. So
fun story for Locked On Pacers fans. I was lucky enough to be covering the Knicks for Sports Illustrated at that time, and I was sitting next to one Malika Andrews before 2 months before she completely blew up and became the biggest freaking person in the NBA sphere. So put that on my resume. Once sat next to Malika Andrews at MSG watching Julius Randle choke away a game against the Pacers. So. And she famously, in my mind, she turned to me and goes, "Do you think he's going to make it?" And I was like, "No."
And then funny, you remember those random that I went to a Pacers Heat. I don't remember if it was an important game for some reason. But Shams Charania was there. He sat right next to me. His pass right next to me. I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I saw him at MSG one time too. He pulled up near me in the writing room, kind of towards the end, and he was wearing a very nice looking suit and some Gucci sneakers or something. And
he was dressed very nice. I think he was doing a TV thing with Jimmy Butler. I can't quite remember, but it's we all belong in those chairs, but it's always surprising to be like, oh, that guy's a megastar in the industry. He's sitting right next to me. So I think this will be a fascinating game. I think the Knicks are better, but I get how the Pacers can win. And either way, I think fans for the Pacers will be jazzed up to have 4 starters playing at the same time. It's unbelievable. So looking forward to this game. Guys, if you're on YouTube, this is a crossover, so I'll let you do this too. But Alex is on Twitter. Alex, where can people follow you and all your stuff?
Yeah, so you can check me out at the Alex Wolfe on Twitter, at Locked On Knicks on Twitter. I'm the editor-in-chief of a Knicks site called The Strickland, which you can find at thestrict.land. If you want to go on there and read up on the Knicks a little more, we post game recaps after every game and some other articles. I think if you're listening to this on Wednesday, we should have a really good piece from one of our better writers coming out this morning that you'll really enjoy potentially if you want to learn more about the Knicks. And then also I've been writing for Clutch Points. So, they have Pacers coverage as well, but I've been, of course, doing the Knicks side of that. So check out Clutch Points as well. But yeah, that's it for me. And I'll throw it to you, Tony. Why not? Technically, I think this is more of a Locked On Pacers themed thing here, but this is going to be on Locked On Knicks' feed as well. So why don't you tell everybody where to find you too?
Of course. Yeah, I'm at T East NBA on Twitter, and this podcast is at Locked On Pacers. And I would tell you everywhere I write for, but I just share them all in one place anyway. So that just makes it easier for everybody. All the links will be on my own feed. Yes, if you're on the Locked On Pacers feed, this show will keep going. I got one more segment to talk about. So let's do that. Alex, thank you for the time, man. One more break here before we talk about the Caris LeVert and Malcolm Brogdon duo. So I can talk to you guys about two great groups of people. First up, the good folks over at Built Bar, who are making the best tasting protein bars ever. And I love Thanksgiving, all of the good food and treats, and there's tons of them everywhere. But maybe you want a yummy dessert that isn't so full of calories and sugar around the holidays. It's the perfect time for Built Bars. The new holiday dessert, you can feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie has upward of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. Replace the coconut cream pie with coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie. Lots of good flavors to replace any pie. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein, and covered in 100% real chocolate. It's a great option when you're healthy. If Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, go for a Built Bar to share some at your family gatherings. It will make things less awkward. Maybe Aunt Betty hasn't tried a Built Bar yet. New surprises all month. Limited time flavors arriving at Built.com regularly. Go check that site often. Mark your calendar. Black Friday will be a huge event with a bunch of surprises for them too. Go to Built.com and use that promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order of Built Bars. You got to try them. Seriously, that promo code is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And we're also talking about BetOnline.ag, who are back and better than ever. They have a new web interface for the start of basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season, and you can head over to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code here, Locked On, all one word, to receive that 50% welcome bonus. From basketball, football, baseball, postseason, NHL, boxing, fighting, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. Bet Online, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, final segment today, and Malcolm Brogdon announcing at practice, or saying at practice, that he will play against the Knicks, even tweeting the back emoji and telling reporters you're playing is generally a very good sign that you're going to play. He's listed as questionable on the injury report. I tend to believe Malcolm Brogdon in this instance. So sounds like Brogdon's going to play. It will be, like I said, talking to Alex, the first time we've seen 4 Pacers starters together since mid-April of this year. That is 7 months ago, almost at this point, which is absolutely crazy to see. And I'm excited to see Brogdon and LeVert together. They played 21 games together last season, maybe 22. I had the number in front of me, and then I closed it for some reason, which was not smart. So it's going to be fascinating to see those guys together again, getting more reps together, getting more minutes, and playing under Rick Carlisle's system. And I want to talk about how I think they can fit together going forward, both under Carlisle and in general, because the stats for them last season were super, super interesting, as most things are. So I guess we'll just jump right in. But the natural thing to start with for me is we saw Carlisle in the preseason, especially, go with a lot of McConnell Brogdon groups, and we've seen him go with some Wanamaker McConnell units, and now we've seen some LeVert McConnell units. We've seen him. He likes having those ball handlers on the floor because he's like Bjorkgren in that he likes guys who can get into the paint and create shots. The difference being Bjorkgren had less resources thanks to injuries last year and just a different team, whereas Carlisle's system this year, they really focus on getting the threes and rim shots up in a way they haven't in past seasons. And I think that's interesting for this year's team because even last year, when they had both Brogdon and LeVert on the court, the Pacers were really good at getting shots from those two areas. They had 74% of their shots were either at the rim or from three with those two on the floor last year, which is pretty good, especially considering they played like Sumner was starting for stretches alongside that duo, and they only had one big sometimes. And I think Goga started a couple games with them. Like there was a lot of funkiness to what they had to deal with down the stretch of last season. So they got good shot quality last year, and Carlisle's offensive system is more refined because he's been coaching for longer. I think that it will suit them well. But just generally looking at the stats, it's a fascinating picture to see what you get with this group. So in general, 576 minutes. Usually the standard for this is kind of real statistical markers for lineups is like 750 to 1,000. So we were getting close to knowing what the Pacers were with this duo on the floor last year. So in 576 minutes, the Pacers' offensive rating with both Brogdon and LeVert on the floor last year was 108.8. That's not great. Defensive rating 111.4. So it wasn't awesome for the Pacers. Like I said, injuries do sort of cloud what this can be. Turner missed basically the last month and a half of the season. He was not extremely involved in the pairings games and minutes last year. So that makes sense why their defense might be a little worse. And they were also missing TJ Warren for all of it. They now have Torrey Craig added in, but certainly not the rosiest looking numbers if you look at that. And the Pacers struggled a ton last year in general defensively. Their scheme was atrocious at times, chasing the wrong guys over screens, some crazy blitzes, just very aggressive coverage that didn't always work and didn't always suit the opponent they were playing. So yes, the duo the rating stats for the Pacers when that duo was on the floor last year doesn't look great. And it's very possible in that minutes load that perhaps there's something that is off defensively. And we've seen Brogdon struggle with point of attack defense and LeVert, but I will say under a much more guided system under Carlisle with much more Turner infusion. Like we know Brogdon's a good defender. LeVert can be better on that end for sure, but I think their defense, can be better than that. And the offense is surprisingly low to me, but I mean the biggest stat that stands out is 34.5% from three with those two out there is pretty surprising. And that's another consequence of having, missing their best shooters at times last year with the duo. And, you'd expect that number to go up a little bit. That'll help that offensive rating progress naturally as well. They get shots from the right spot. So Carlisle can, again, I think, help that duo evolve. Now, let me tailor in a little farther to a little more optimization. Caris LeVert and Malcolm Brogdon both on the floor, and only one of Turner or Sabonis on the floor with them last year. 205 minutes. So again, not a ton. We're not talking about a ton. We're talking about like 4.5 full games of playing time. That is not very much to really contextualize what we're talking about. Like when we're talking about 500 minutes, we're talking about like 15 games. I can't do that math in my head very quickly. Not even 15 games, right? So that gives you a sample size of what I was just talking about with the numbers with all Brogdon-LeVert minutes. Now let's tailor that to one center because those went a lot better. In those moments, insane offensive rating, 114.6. The team could really score, 111.9 defensive rating. So about the same as the number just in general, right? So their offense was absolutely bonkers in those minutes. They had their biggest unit, 92 minutes with Sabonis, LeVert, Brogdon, Sumner, and Holiday, 229 points on 199 possessions, which is excellent. 38% from deep that group, 51.5% from 2-point range. So I think that the way that Carlisle's doing it, where there's a little less Turbonis time, right? Who subs out Sabonis earlier on for either Craig or O'Shea, and then Turner plays with the first unit for a little bit, and then Turner comes out when the first unit is still in, and Sabonis gets a little bit of run with them before the bench comes in, has been working, and he doesn't play Turner a ton in fourth quarters, which again, that might be a discussion for a future podcast because that's been fascinating to see. But he's doing more separate minutes for them, which could also, beyond just more natural and good NBA schemes helping their numbers go up, the fact that they will be playing likely more minutes with one center and stretchier lineups. And, Sumner was a great shooter last year, but I think that there's more of a threat from the guys on the team now than him. I mean, he was open for a reason. He made him. Credit to him. So I think that this year, those numbers could perhaps be more reflective of what we see is about a 114, 113 offensive rating and about a 111 defensive rating. And I think that's fair. That's a good thing for your starting lineup to have two players like that. But I just think they're going to fit really well with what Carlisle wants to do. I think Justin Holiday is, of course, an excellent fit next to those guys. I think Torrey Craig is a really good fit next to those guys, even in tandem with those two guys next to Brogdon and LeVert. I think you get a good fit both by adding in defense that, LeVert lacks a little bit and also just adding some bulk. And Torrey Craig shot better from three than I thought he would this year. Full credit to him. And he's had some nice passing moments in recent games, so he could fit right in with them offensively, just keeping the ball moving around. And, we've seen Brogdon succeed in off-ball roles. Scott Agnes was asking Rick Carlisle this after a preseason game when Brogdon was very effective. I think it was the Cavs game when he had 29 points. And, he was paired with McConnell a lot, and he was scoring off-ball really well. And I think that can be where he is effective in the Carlisle system and scheme because Caris, we've already seen how much he helps this team just by being a threat to do more than one thing after putting the ball on the floor. Whereas all the other creators the Pacers have are either shooting or passing. They're very rarely a threat to do either. Caris can do either. And I think that if you put Brogdon on the strong side and let Caris be the decision maker, that helps every single party. Brogdon can space the floor out, but if you don't give him any space, he can come around, an off-ball screen and get open, or just there are just so many ways for them to create advantages with the team they have, with the stuff Carlisle likes to do, with the shot profile that they chase, that I think that they will fit extremely well with what we've seen through 8 games of this team. And there's a reason they extended Brogdon to line up more with the core of the team that they have, because they think he can fit well, and they think he's good enough to make that lineup awesome. And I think he will. And I think if we can see LeVert continue to do what he's been doing with more minutes as well, where he is getting into that pain and causing the defense to decide if they want to cut off his mid-range shot, or if they want to stick on him and let Sabonis have like 1 second to like assess the situation and try to get open, or if they want to send someone from the weak side and leave a shooter open. Like, LeVert's been good at getting those guys the ball. Now imagine Brogdon is adding into the decisions they have to make. Like, it's just obvious how that is going to help the team. So the numbers from last year in general don't look awesome. The numbers with only one center do look awesome. It's not fair to say one or the other is more important, because they're going to be playing in moments with both one and both centers. So maybe it's the optimist's take, but just in general, more natural defensive schemes will help their numbers. And Rick Carlisle's style of play, the shots he likes to chase, the way he likes to generate those shots, the shots he encourages even, right? He's like, if you're in the game and you're open on the catch, shoot it, right? Like, he doesn't care who you are. He's letting TJ McConnell fire away, Goga, everybody who even historically has not been a good shooter can bomb it away. If you have more good players on the court who have the freedom to bomb it away, that seems like a good thing, right? So I think that systemic changes from last year will make their numbers better. The question is, are we talking about a baseline of a -2.5 net rating, or are we talking about a baseline of a +2.5 net rating? That kind of remains to be seen. That depends on how Carlisle shakes out his rotational stuff. But I'm really looking forward to seeing that duo in action tonight. It's going to be fascinating. 4 starters for the Pacers, possibly at the same time, knock on wood, because that has occasionally not been the most reliable thing, but we'll see. The injury report for this team has constantly added someone when someone comes off of it. So ideally, no one is going on the injury report this time, and the Pacers can just enjoy the addition of another good player. I'm so excited to watch what this lineup can be against the Knicks tonight. It's going to be an awesome game. Hope you guys all watch it, and we'll, of course, be recapping it tomorrow with Adam. He will finally be back from his trip, from his life of fun away from talking to me every day. So look forward to that. Thank you guys a ton for listening. That show will be out tomorrow, and we will see you then.